So I want to talk about the Canon EOS R and the A7 III. So short story is that I ended up finding my way back to an A7 III, which is actually recording me right now. I wanted to give it another shot, especially with and alongside the Canon EOS R that I have. So yeah, I want to talk about a little bit about why I'm doing that, what I think the major differences are, and kind of the bigger picture, because I think it's a lot bigger about just A7 III versus Canon EOS R. I think it's really about what system that you're getting into and kind of looking at the bigger picture of things. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. As with everything, I'm approaching this from a wedding photographer and videographer. We shoot both photo and video, and I need a lot of versatility in my camera gear. And I'm trying to do that with the most minimal system possible, because money's a thing and I'm not to the point to where I can have 2 different systems, 3 different systems. So that's just kind of where I'm at. I also do commercial work. So not only with wedding photo and video, I also shoot video. It ends up being a lot of the time for commercially. So why did I pick up an A7 III? Truthfully, I'm getting a little bit frustrated with Canon because the A7 III has been out for a little while now. The Canon EOS R is kind of the response to that. At least we think that it is, because they're priced at the same price point, and the feature set between the two is a little bit different. And I say a little bit different, but I think that a lot of people on the internet would argue that it's a lot different. So those are the things that I want to touch on today. The Sony can definitely be a workhorse camera for sure, for just about for anything. You can shoot video, you can shoot photos, you can shoot wildlife, weddings. I think it's a great overall all-around good camera. The Canon EOS R, I think, is very much geared towards social media creators and YouTube. I think for those particular things, this camera absolutely excels at. Can you shoot portraits with this? Yes. Can you shoot weddings with this? Yes. And I put an asterisk there because what tolerance do you have for dual card slots? Is that something that you're going to worry about a lot? Or are you okay with that? Do you have a backup solution in place for wedding day photos that you're comfortable with? And that's the toss up there that you have to decide whether or not you're comfortable with it or not. Truthfully, I think that for commercial work, for big businesses, organizations, nonprofits, I would be okay with shooting both of them. I think I would lean more towards having a preference for the A7 III, partly because of the dual card slots, and then also to the amount of flexibility that I think that I have in video in this camera versus the EOS R. 1080-120 in this camera, the fact that it's there is kind of that little nudge up, whereas the EOS R has 720-120 and it doesn't have autofocus, and the A7 III has autofocus and you can have audio in that. So that's just kind of when you get down to it, I think that I would pick this one for commercial work. So I think that the bigger, more important conversation that needs to be had when considering these two cameras is that both of these cameras are kind of the entry into the Canon or Sony system. I think that when you're moving to full frame, you may have started out as a hobbyist or as an amateur, whatever you want to call it, and then you want to start shooting professionally, and you want to start shooting professionally at a very high level. I think that you're going to be considering both of these cameras because they're both around the $2,000 price point right now. So this is kind of going to be your gateway into each ecosystem. And so you have to think about it in terms of that, I think, more importantly, versus just a single camera, because what are the lenses going to look like? What lens choices do I have? Eventually, you're going to need a second body. What body will you choose to complement whatever it is that you end up picking? So in terms of that, I think that I'm leaning more towards saying that the A7 III is a great all-around camera. Do I think that the EOS R is a great all-around camera? Yes. However, I think that there are more people that will be uncomfortable with having a single card slot versus the dual card slot that Sony has. But the A7 III, the autofocus system, the features that they have, and the willingness to listen to their customer base, I think, is the most important thing that kind of dictates the future. So I think that the overall system that the Sony has and the things like having lenses that are totally silent for autofocus. IAF, that is absolutely game changing. It's a different way of looking at an autofocusing system. But once you wrap your head around that, once you are able to fit that within your workflow, then I think that it is nothing but a benefit. Okay, so now I'm gonna switch over real quick from the A7 III right now, which has a Canon 24L on it, totally manual focus, so I just manually focus that to where I'm at right now. I'm gonna switch over to the EOS R, and we're gonna see if you guys can see a difference right now. So ready, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is now the Canon EOS R, and you'll notice that it's pretty cropped in, like it's literally just my face, and that's because I was shooting in 4K 24 with the Sony, and then now this is 4K with the Canon EOS R. Obviously, big difference is that there's a crop. So that's kind of a small thing that I think that for filmmakers and for people who are in the cinema world, they're used to Super 35, and that's essentially what this is. It's maybe a little bit more cropped in than that, but it's pretty close to Super 35. So that's not a big deal to me. In fact, you can probably use this to your advantage. I used it in the past, as I think in one of my other videos, about where I used 4K as a quality bump and then also more reach because of the crop. So I don't think that that's a big deal, but when you compare them side by side, having the ability to choose whether or not you crop in with the A7 III, I think having the choice is kind of nice versus just automatically being cropped in with the Canon EOS R. For social media content creators, I already have a screen that I can look at right here off to the side. Obviously with the Sony A7 III, I can't do that. This just flips up and down, and that's pretty much it. So if you are very heavy into content creating for YouTube, I think that the Canon EOS R is probably going to be a better fit for you. You can make it work obviously with the Sony. I have an Atomos Ninja 5, and then I tend to mount that on top of this guy, and then that works for me. So, but then again, that's an added cost onto already a expensive camera body if you're just getting into either system. So that's just something that you have to think about. It really comes down to which one is your priority. If you're just doing YouTube, then I'd say Canon EOS R. If you're doing YouTube and then also professional work, then I would say that the Sony A7 III is probably a better bet for you just because of the versatility that this has. So I'm gonna take this out of crop mode real quick. That way we can get back to the same scale of what the Sony A7 III was at. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Now this is at the same place, same tripod distance that I had for the Sony, and hopefully you can see a difference. If not, then they're pretty close together. I can't really tell this moment, but yeah, so same setup, 24L on the EOS R versus the A7 III. The things that the EOS R has over the Sony A7 III, I would say are, one, obviously it's a Canon, so grip is great. Weather sealing, this body I would have no problem taking out into inclement weather, whether it's raining or cold, snowing. I just feel more confident with this one than I do with the Sony. So that's something to keep in mind. That may or may not be a deal breaker for you depending on what it is that you shoot. So it has Canon colors, and I know that's beaten to death and talked about so much on YouTube, but if you're one that doesn't like to spend a whole ton of time color grading, or maybe you're not a colorist, then I think that this may be a better fit for you. However, if you're someone that wants to have complete control over that and you want to spend the time, then maybe the Sony is it for you, because there's things like S-Log2, S-Log3, HLG, hybrid log gamma, and you have all of those different options, whereas this does have C-Log and then the normal profiles. So that's just something to consider. Can you get Canon colors from a Sony camera? Yes, you can. And that's probably a whole nother video that would need to be talked about. But the short answer is yes, you can get very close to Canon colors with a Sony body. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch back over now to the Sony A7 III to finish this off, and then we'll go from there. I've been able to get photos that I am proud of and that I'm happy with out of each camera. And so it ends up being, which camera do I enjoy the most, but also which camera is going to fulfill the most needs that I have. I really think that both of these cameras are on a level playing field. You do really need to go in and get a hold of them and go through the menus and kind of get accustomed. Give yourself some time to get to learn each system and decide which one it is that you really enjoy, and then also which feature set is going to allow you to either grow into, or also what is it going to allow me to accomplish, and how good of an investment is that? Am I gonna have to replace the camera in the next cycle of cameras that comes out? Or is this going to be a camera that's going to last me a long time to come? So I hope that helps you guys. I hope that perspective kind of gives you a little bit of insight into it. So I'll catch you guys later. So I'm going to talk about the Canon EOS R and the... Okay, wait just a second. I want to throw in just a couple of small things. So from a wedding photographer standpoint, I realized I didn't talk about low light, both high ISO and autofocus. Honestly, the reason I didn't talk about that is because I think that both of them are totally usable. And I don't even think usable is the right word. I think that they're fantastic, because coming from a 5D Mark IV, which I think is good, and then also Nikon D750s I've used and even tried out D850s, both of these cameras are better, if not just as good as any of those. The EOS R and the A7 III are definitely better than the 5D Mark IV, just from my own personal experience. So take that for what it is. Both in autofocus and low light, high ISO, so just know that. EOS R, easily usable, 12,800. A7 III, I would use 25,600, and I've used 32,002 before, so that just kind of goes to show you, like, these things are good, but not an issue with either one of these cameras. So yeah, I just want to throw that in there. Also, I did end up with an A7 III, and I want to talk more about why I'm using the A7 III for the majority of my stuff professionally now, so that's just more content to come. All right, so I'll catch you guys later. Hope you guys enjoyed it.